joust between friends is fabulous, and with a couple of really shocking moments as well. This is the 9th episode of the 2nd season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through things chronologically and share some thoughts along the way. There are a couple of quotes that I want to share that I absolutely loved, and in general, it's a brilliant episode. So it starts off with Rose welcoming a dog into the house, and we find out that this is a lost dog. She's took the dog home to try and find the owner. Absolutely adorable. Dorothy then comes in, and we find out that she's temporarily lost her teaching job. I didn't really fully understand the situation, but apparently teachers had to not work for 10 weeks. They had to take like a 10-week leave. I don't know what this is. If anybody can provide more information, please feel free to do so. But Dorothy, at Blanche's suggestion, goes for a job at the museum where Blanche works. She gets hired, and there are a lot of things going on for Dorothy because she also is not a fan of dogs. She seems like she's not a fan of dogs. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but she's dealing with the dog at the house and the new job. But things start to go in a positive direction for her. Cut to a week later, the dog is still there. It was an agreement that he could stay for one night, so that didn't exactly go according to plan. And Sophia had given the dog Sherry, which is a little bit awkward, and Dorothy is grumbling about the dog being there, and Rose picks the dog up and tells Dorothy to lighten up, but in the dog's voice. And Rose, I feel like, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like Rose said more words in the dog's voice than she did in her own voice in this episode. It was an absolutely charming episode, and the dog is just absolutely precious. Mr. Allen, Blanche and Dorothy's boss, then calls the house to speak to Dorothy. And this is really the first indication we get that Blanche is not 100% happy that Dorothy is working with her, because things seem to be going too well for Dorothy at the museum. And when Dorothy is alone in the kitchen with the dog jumps up on the chair and is sitting in front of the sherry. And here we also get the first sign that actually maybe Dorothy doesn't hate dogs, because she tells the dog, "Promise me you won't drive." And that's the kind of first real interaction she has with the dog. And it's very sweet, and she clearly cared for the dog. And I will talk more about that in a little bit. We're then down at the museum. Sophia visits Dorothy, and then Mr. Allen, we find out, has put Dorothy in charge of the banquet. And Blanche is really hurt because Blanche thought she would be in charge of organising this banquet. And I will say at this point, I didn't predict what would happen next with that part of the story, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but I feel like there's a lot of suspense. It's definitely holding a lot back, and I think the pacing and the rate at which we are given information is absolutely brilliant. Very, very well written episode. Plus we have some brilliant quotes coming up. Then we have Dorothy in bed, and she rolls over, and the dog is lying asleep on the bed beside her. Absolutely gorgeous. And Dorothy obviously gets up and she starts to talk to the dog. And finally we find out why she's been quite abrasive towards this dog. And it's emotional because she used to have a dog called Wawa. And we do find out why it's called Wawa. And when she lost Wawa, she was understandably heartbroken. And she doesn't want to get attached to another dog, another animal, because she doesn't want to go through that again, which I think is completely reasonable. And it just helps to highlight that actually she's not anti-dog, she's very much pro-dog, and that's the problem. She loves dogs so much that is going to cause a lot of heartache, and that is, of course, one of the worst things, maybe the only real bad thing about having a pet. And I know people say it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And while I think that's true, it doesn't really help to ease the pain. Dorothy then goes into the kitchen and confronts Rose, and the wall is back up. She's not giving anything away about the heart-to-heart she just had with the dog. The wall is back up, and she asks Rose to get a dog biscuit, which was rather delightful. And then Blanche comes in and talks to Dorothy about the knife in her back, and we have a little bit of a confrontation there, and they're not being very pleasant. And then Rose is alone with the dog, and this is the first quote of a couple that genuinely made me gasp because I didn't expect it. And she's cuddling the dog. And Blanche and Dorothy are leaving the room, not being very positive. And Rose says to the dog, in the dog's voice, she's pretending actually the dog is saying it to Rose. The dog says, I used to live with a couple of bitches myself. Wasn't expecting it. And because it comes out of Rose's mouth, sweet, innocent Rose, even though it's technically the dog saying it, it's just so funny. And it gets worse, but I'll get there when we get there. We then find out the mystery around the banquet, the bit that I said I hadn't expected. And this is the fact that the banquet is for Blanche. That's why Dorothy is organising it, because Blanche can't organise her own banquet. I mean, she could, but it would be a bit awkward. And Mr. Allen gives Dorothy some papers. She hides them from Blanche, of course she does. And Blanche ends up storming out of the room and declaring that she quits, which seems a little bit dramatic, but at the same time, it does seem like Dorothy is becoming the new favourite and is better than her at her job. And I don't necessarily think Blanche reacted appropriately, but I can understand why she behaved the way she did. That sounds contradictory, but hopefully you'll know what I mean. And while I don't like to see them fighting, we do get a line that I absolutely loved. I genuinely don't know if I was more shocked or greatly amused. Immediately after, Blanche comes into the house and Dorothy says, Hi, Blanche. And Blanche replies, Eat dirt and die, trash. Just, it was brilliant, so unexpected and very, very vicious. And Sophia is not putting up with this, so she tells Blanche the truth, that the banquet is for her. And we have a lovely moment between Blanche and Dorothy, and Blanche offers to give her a check for $70 or $75, and Dorothy, I think, did the right thing. She said she'd accept the check to make Blanche feel better for being mean, but she wasn't going to cash it. She was going to keep it as a reminder for the next time Blanche behaved like that, which I thought was a really great way to kind of conclude that part of the story. The only thing I wasn't very happy with is how Blanche found out, because I really wanted to see her face when she learned at the banquet that the banquet was for her, and I wish we'd had that opportunity. And obviously the episode would have played out differently, so maybe it wouldn't have been as good, but I was really looking forward to it. I'd expected that we were going to get to see that moment at the banquet when she realised it was for her, and unfortunately that's not the case. So I'm not unhappy with how things played out, but personally I think I would have preferred that. And then we have the final scene. Rose comes in, the dog is gone. She found the owner, and Dorothy actually gets emotional. She is a little bit upset that the dog has gone, and she admits that she loves dogs. And Rose says she felt the same way about the dog being gone, so she went to the animal shelter on the way home, and I thought she was going to call in a dog. I thought she was going to go and get a dog. And instead, she opens the door and in comes just a pack of dogs. And I was just so happy. Are they going to be in future episodes? Did she just foster the dogs? Do they now have 101 dogs running around the house? I'll find out in due course. I'd like to think they'd keep the dogs, but also I feel like having that many dogs running around would be a bit almost distracting from the main narrative. Granted, they wouldn't be on set all of the time, but I don't know, I can't think of a sitcom or a TV show where they've had more than one dog for any duration of time. I'm sure there must be one where they have multiple pets, but it's just not the done thing. It's probably just something where they're going to say she fostered them, it wasn't permanent, she was looking after them till they found their forever homes. But secretly, I'm hoping the dogs stick around. I'll find out with the next episode, I'm sure. But for now, very, very happy with Joust Between Friends. I thought this was a pretty fabulous episode.